Hello and welcome back to episode 9 of Playtime with Rufus, a spiritual and metaphysical podcast unlike any other. My name is Mario and I'm so glad you're here. After 2 episodes exploring the physical layer of the human experience, today we shift into new territory, the emotional layer, the core of what it means to be human on this planet. In this conversation, Rufus, channeled as always through my dear and incredibly gifted friend Émilie, unpacks why emotions are at the very heart of the Earthian playtime. We explore that every feeling is energy in motion, how the emotional layer shapes the avatar's entire reality, and why this is the layer that holds the resonance of the non-incarnated greater self, or the player. Rufus also breaks down what happens when the emotional, mental, and physical layers fall out of alignment, why so many humans struggle with expressing what they truly feel, and how multiple versions of the self can be unconsciously created when our emotions are not connected to physical expression. Along the way, we'll dive into topics such as introverts, the roots of emotional suppression, how trauma imprints the layers, and why empaths often see straight through other avatars' constructs. As always, Rufus offers clear, practical guidance on how to reconnect the layers, strengthen emotional honesty, and reclaim responsibility for the reality we create. If you've ever wondered why human relationships can feel so complicated, or why being fully yourself can at times be very difficult, this episode will shed light on the mechanics behind it. If you're enjoying Playtime with Rufus, please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe so that these conversations reach as many people as possible. We appreciate your support immensely. And now, buckle up and enjoy the ride. This is episode 9 of Playtime with Rufus, where higher wisdom meets human curiosity. I would like to ask Rufus to integrate themselves into the body now so we can speak to each other again. May I speak to Rufus again, please?
Yes, you're settling.
Take your time
Oh, thank you.
and let me know when you're ready.
It should do.
All right. Hi, Rufus. Welcome back.
Hey, Mario.
Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Of course, it's our pleasure as always.
Likewise, on our plane, it's been a while,
Yeah,
and Émilie and I are both super happy to be able to continue our work today.
we are excited as well.
Very nice. Of course, we've had the holidays, which is usually a period of rest, of family time. So that was happening, but also Emily's physical condition has made it impossible for a while to continue with this work. Can you tell us a bit about her condition and while she has been experiencing it?
Yeah, it is not a heavy condition. Be reassured that this is not of major concern. It is simply a seasonal urge that is occurring in her body as we speak through it. This is not as messy as it could seem to be. It should be okay as soon as the body has completed the purge, which may take few more weeks or perhaps days, but this is not of major concern. It is just necessary in order for the body to continue working properly. Sometimes your own vehicle need to purge your body that you are using, just like a vehicle need to purge as well. Nothing to be concerned with.
All right. That's good to hear. Is there anything that she can do to support the purging process?
She is actually doing quite alright, resting when she can and taking care of her body just like she should. So she is doing okay for the time being. There is not much more that could be done besides resting even more if she can.
Very good. Does this also apply to her family members who've been going through a similar experience?
Yes, all of them needed to purge some heavy stuff, probably affecting more of the emotional layer in their, let's say, set of bodies, but needing to purge through the physical layer. Each and every one of them is undergoing major changes, whether it is about their comfort zone or the way they are used to leave this experience. It is actually on the verge of changing for all of them, for they are needing to adjust and not resist to those changes. But sometimes emotions can be heavy and hard to sail through, and the physical aspect of self that would therefore need to purge on a physical level in order to digest and move forward with the new set of, let's say, directions that has been chosen by the player. So we could consider this as a collective need for purging and moving on into the next chapter.
That's very interesting. Thank you so much for explaining this.
You're welcome.
May I ask a question regarding my own physical experience after the holidays?
Yes, of course.
I also experienced sickness of some kind, however, not of the same type. For me, it was a very fast but intense flu-like situation with temperature and body aches and cold sweats, shivering. And I was wondering if you could shed some light on this experience for me.
Yes, this was probably linked to a similar situation as Emily's family. You see, you need to remember this is the end of your year. Therefore, in order to enter a new cycle or a new year, as you may call it, you need to assess and, let's see, the word we could use is reflect on what happened in the previous cycle and what needs to be changed or adjusted in the new cycle to be entered. And sometimes there is quite some difficulties for the players' layers to accept fully and adjust without perturbation into their new chapter of self. Therefore, because all of your layers are intricately linked to each other, you may feel or receive information on a specific layer that will need to be processed out in order to allow changes to take place and sit anchored within yourself in order to manifest into your new cycle. Sometimes this creates conflict within your own bodies, if we may say, on cellular level as well as organs level. This may need to be purged or expressed in a way that is characterized by what you may call sickness or disease or something that will put you out of a pleasant set of being just because it needs to be done in order to move on. Sometimes it will be very intense as the time gap between one state of being and the next is not that long. Therefore, the adjustment needs to be, we may say, very efficient, and the intensity that will go with it will be stronger. Sometimes there is a little bigger gap that could take place, and therefore the intensity may not be as strong, but it may last longer on a duration. In your case, you probably needed to take everything out of your layers that were not needed anymore, but the gap was so small to embrace those changes and to evacuate all the heavy or maybe unwanted emotions and, let's say, informations that were coming through you that you needed to shed as fast as possible in order to collect yourself again and move on to your new chapter. If you decided that your time was very little in order to do that and reset yourself onto your new cycle, the intensity of your physical symptoms will therefore be of higher level. If you may have decided for yourself to allow to give yourself a little more time and assess the new you, quote marks, you may have felt a little less intensity in your physical symptoms, but it would probably have taken more time to settle in and to allow yourself to adjust into a newer version ready to take on what's next. Remember, if you are living in a world where there are days and nights, seasons, months, and years, you're also connected to this aspect of your game, and you are functioning as well as what you call end of years and beginning of a new one. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I'm now understanding a pattern in my life, which includes being sick not very often, but when I do, it's quite intense and very short.
You're probably, maybe unconsciously or now consciously, a bit in a hurry or impatient with changes that needs to be happening, knowing that you are very capable of addressing those changes fast because you are somehow able to handle the brutality, if we may say, of the symptoms coming with those changes, which is good for you because it makes the process faster. It's a gain of time. Some people or avatar, if we may say, are not able to handle, let's say, brutal, sudden, or intense symptoms, and they would rather taking more time or a longer duration in order to have milder symptoms. That makes sense?
It does. Yeah. All right. You were just mentioning the annual cycle and the
Yeah.
seasons. And this has been topic as well for me and also for other people I know. The official calendar year does indeed start with the 1st of January. However, there's also the approach that the actual natural year starts with the season of spring, which would be marked by the spring equinox, when day and night are in balance again regarding time. Can you speak to this? How do you see the year beginning?
Well,
When do you see it?
for us, remember nothing begins and nothing ends. But if we may play this game, it is quite logical to follow the natural cycle, which may starts with spring as everything is kind of rebirthing or regrowing in that season. But because the common or the mainstream idea of your society adopted a calendar that would start in January, even if you are linked to the natural seasons of life, you are also somehow coded to play with societal norms, and therefore you are also accepting that your year ends in December and starts in January. So you are coding yourself to embrace that new type of cycle, even if your avatar is built naturally to follow a more, let's say, natural cycle that will be based on Mother Nature and your surrounding. But remember, everything has its importance and everything has its impact on your playtime and on your way of playing it. So even if intrinsically inside you really feel that there is more of a logical way of feeling the natural cycle as a year, you are also now coded and programmed and used to accept the given cycle of the Occidental calendar. So, depending on your frame of reference and what you decide to take in and receive. Let's say if you are a player that is firmly in harmony with nature and decided that for you the real calendar starts with spring equinox, then you will probably have symptoms that will be indicative of a new cycle around spring season. But if you are a player that is comfortable with societal norms and that is playing within these rules, therefore you will be feeling the changes probably by the end of December, beginning of January. It will depend on what your own belief system and what your own acceptance of information is. See, you could make your own rules. It really is a matter of what you are accepting receiving and what your frame of reference become. If you accept both, meaning that you are accepting the end of the year in December, but you are also accepting that there is somehow another kind of year at spring equinox, you might have two sessions of adjustment. It really depends on what yourself as a player decided to accept as a rule. Does that make sense?
A lot, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I remember information that was given, I believe, by Seth at the time. I believe he stated that the day of birth, when an individual has entered the game is each year a great opportunity for change and transformation because the energies that enabled the being to enter this physical plane, they are there every year, so to speak.
Yeah.
Can you speak about this from your perspective?
Yes. This is also a cycle that is being fed by the player. A player, when approaching their birthday, are aware they are approaching their birthday, and therefore, in their frame of reference, it is given as a new beginning, new cycle, new maturity level, a new year achieved in this game, a new celebration or a new grief, depending on how they are looking at their experience and how pleased they are with it. But definitely, this has something to do with the fact that the player accepted that information as given to them that on this specific day of their experience, each year they will be somehow aging. Maybe they tend to forget that every second of the game they are aging. But this particular day carries so much more than every other second of the game because it is almost like you are marking the journey of oneself. On that day, I accomplished a year. On that day, I am moving towards another one that somehow brings me closer to the end of my game, which carries a lot of responsibilities, a lot of reflecting, a lot of processing of the informations that was obtained and received during the previous year. So you see, the player approached that day with such a strong energy that is taking pretty much everything on their own journey into consideration because this day is marked for them. On top of this day somehow is within a specific season, within a specific natural cycle that they are familiar with because they chose to come play with this cycle. So they are also dealing with the natural energy that is given with that specific day. Also, the numbers of that day are carrying a specific energy as well. So you could imagine that all of the different source of energy, of vibrational energy that will come with their mark and that will come with their story of living and that will come with their coded self that knows that on that day they are aging or they are renewing or entering a new passage of life, if we may say. This is quite heavy energetically on multiple layers of the play. Therefore, we are in agreement with the Seth material on that topic because it is a very specific days and depending on the state of being the player is approaching that day, it could also allow or disallow manifestation the way the players need it to happen. Because if the player approached that day that is marked for them with an energy of dis-ease, sadness, nostalgia, and accomplishment and fulfillment, negativity, if we may say this word, some heavier vibrations, and they are not recognizing it as an opportunity, as an gratitude to have had that much time in this game and to be able to pass on into the next round and they are approaching it with a heavy heart. This will be the trigger for the next cycle to come. This will set the directive for what's next. So this has a very big importance how they approach that day, because this day is marked for them. And when something is marked, just think about it as a specific tick of coding. Let's say, had an oscillation, and you would see it would be high and low, or it would create like a certain pattern of waves. Something is marked is the top wave. So if the top of the wave is moving towards something uplifting, if we may say, this could be very good for the cycle to come. But if this top of the wave is moving to the contrary in a very pessimistic place or heavy hearted place or something that would drag you down as a player, this could be very hard to navigate through it for the next cycle. So when a day is marked by the player consciously, because this is the case for what you may call birthday, the player consciously know and recognize this mark, then everything that they are able to assess at that given moment will be very heavy, influential for the next cycle to experience. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. Could it be stated, therefore, that approaching this day or experiencing this day with celebration and joy and laughter and harmony is beneficial for the coming cycle?
We could say yes and we could say no. It depends on what the player would like to experience at this time. But in terms of higher frequency, if we are still looking for ways to raise a player frequency, then yes, this will be beneficial. But if the next cycle is needed for the player to feel nostalgic or sad or to purge in a very heavy hearted way, then this might not be beneficial. It really depends on what would be appropriate for the player to experience at the time of the cycle. But yes, if the goal is to raise frequency and vibrate on the lighter vibrational spectrum and be more able to manifest consciously or to create realities that is reflecting their will, it will be needed to approach that day with an energetical pattern that will reflect this, meaning gratitude for what they have lived and experienced, gratitude to be able to enter a new cycle of game, assessing all that has been given and learned and received, accepting all that is still needed to be learned and received, and being able to be gentle with themselves in the areas of their life that is not fully satisfying for them. This will be the kind of approach that would put them in a higher frequency to start a new cycle. On top of that, if they are able to implement a feeling of joy and community and love and abundance because they decided to share that day with friends, family, animals, nature, something that is vibrating, that is alive, if we may say. This will also keep on carrying that vibrational energetic pattern. And therefore, all this will be a great combination in order to start a cycle that will allow them to manifest consciously what they desire. Now remember, sometimes what we need is to feel sorry about ourselves, cry, feel nostalgic, feel heavy, a lower energy in order to be able to purge and look for shadow work that hasn't been completed. So it really depends on what kind of cycle is needed. But we hope we are being clear on saying that if the goal is to raise frequency, then yes, this will be a good combination. But if the goal is to tackle some shadow work, then maybe no.
Right. That makes sense. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I've also encountered the idea that ignoring your birthday, not making a big deal out of it, not even celebrating it, could somehow slow down the aging process. What is your perspective on this?
Well, it could, but not because you're ignoring it, just because the player set a new frame of reference for themselves, deciding that they are not aging. If you're ignoring your birthday, you are sending a signal to yourself that you're stopping aging right there, that you're not adding years onto your experience, that you are staying at, let's say, the age of 20 instead of moving into 21. Therefore, you are conditioning and coding yourself for staying at 20, for not aging anymore, which could create a reality that would reflect this, meaning maybe physically you are not aging much. You are staying in your 20s for a little longer than if you were accepting going up in numbers. It is just the reflection of what the player is sending and coding itself for. When we are saying that every human has the possibility of crafting and creating their own reality and their own game, this is how it's done by coding yourself, by giving yourself some set of informations that will be integrated a certain way that they will become your reality. If you're telling yourself that from that day on, you are not aging anymore, your reality will somehow reflect that knowledge or certainty that you're feeding yourself. The same truth if you are telling yourself that you are, let's say, fit every day of your life, then your silhouette might start reflecting that reality because you are reinforcing this information as being now your truth and you are therefore manifesting it. So this is true in a sense that the player is telling him or herself, depending on the choosing, what game they are willing to play. Do you understand what we're trying to convey?
I believe I do.
Okay, great.
I assume that the true strength of the belief is critical here and
Yeah,
not the statements that someone is making.
absolutely. A statement is void if it doesn't carry the vibration that is matching it. Player can tell themselves as loud, as often, and as many times they want a certain statement. If they are not embracing and embodying this statement on a vibrational level, meaning that they are feeling inside that they are very much imprinted of this statement with their entire set of bodies, this is void. Like one player having one statement that is supported by the feel of what this statement will feel like if it were true, and really at the moment of that statement, embracing it fully on every aspect of themselves, then this may have an impact that will be so big and so powerful compared to someone using this statement over and over and over again with void behind it. Do you understand the difference?
Yes, I do.
This is what is often missed when some of you guys are attempting to apply what you call law of attraction because you are using it with void instead of using it with the correct vibrations to accompany your statement and your projection. This is the real effect of it. Being able to trick yourself somehow to really feel the statement, to really embody what it would mean, what it would feel like to already live in that reality of this statement.
Which would explain the varying results for people who are trying to do the same thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for this wonderful information.
You're welcome.
It's interesting because while listening to everything you were explaining, it became clear how crucial the emotional realm, the emotional layer is to all of that.
Yeah.
And we actually planned to start talking about the emotional layer today. And I believe we kind of already have in a way.
Yeah.
But let us now officially start with the analysis of this layer. As usual, I would like to allow you to start talking about the importance of the emotional layer, however
Yes.
you seem appropriate.
This is the core of this playtime, to experience emotion, because emotion is energy in motion. And this is exactly what every player came here to experience. Your avatar is made to be driven specifically by emotions. Everything is designed to give you or to trigger some type of energy that will be put in motion. This is exactly what emotions are. It's almost like if you were given a set of information that would trigger some sort of response within you, and this response will then trigger some sort of action or reaction to the give trigger. Well, running a bit in circle, but hopefully we're going to be as clear as possible.
I think so.
So let's say the physical body is the envelope that allows you to carry yourself within this realm of tangible, of material, of the world, if we may say. But the emotions are what makes your avatar alive somehow, and what makes your avatar experience, because you're not really experiencing without emotions. You're not really choosing without emotions. You're not really taking decision. You're not really making action. You're not really having will or drive without emotions, if you think about it. When you first came into this world as a baby and you're being put out in the world, taken out of the womb, you're reacting to a new set of informations. That will be your surrounding. That will be a different kind of temperature. That will be a different kind of world, because it's no longer liquid. It's now dry with some air. So every surrounding is now a new pattern to you. And as a baby, you are taking this set of information and you are triggering an emotional response to it, meaning you're disoriented. It is different. It is somehow taking you outside of what was comfortable for you. So you're experiencing now a certain discomfort. That discomfort will be triggering an emotions of, let's say, dis-ease, or if we may use that word, even if it's not really the correct one, but fear of feeling imbalanced, of feeling insecure. So all this piled up results in a big scream and cry of the baby coming out. This is the set of information that is given to you, that is interpreted with your emotional layers, that is then sending to your physical body to be expressed, to be put into actions that will be able to be perceived by your environment. Because emotions are internal, right? This is your secret body, your secret layer that no one else but you can really see and really know, unless you are able to connect this aspect of yourself with your physical layer in order to express accurately, properly, with the correct level, your emotions through your physicality. But if you're not able to do that, then your emotions will be only known by you. This is actually the real you, what you feel, what you are receiving. You can decide how you're sending it back, but the way you're receiving is your true self, your set of informations that is proper to you, that is untouched by anything else but you. This is why it's the most important. Nobody can choose how to receive this information but you. And you could pretty much choose to keep it secret if you decide to do so. So the main body really is your emotional body. This is the most important for this playtime because it's going to be the one that will decide everything you do in life. It is actually, how could we compare it? It's the biggest receptor of any given information. It's your central manufacturer that would after code for everything in your life. So your emotional layer, if you are able to control it, and if you are able to, how could we say that? Decide whether or not you are sharing it with your surroundings, can create a personality that will be known by you and perceived by you that would be completely different from the personality that would be known by others and perceived by others. So the way you are handling the links between emotional layers and physical layers will create one or several avatars. We're going to try to explain. We're going to have a lot of stuff to say about this topic, and we may not approach it in order, but we will try to emphasize what we think is important to understand how an avatar can be lost sometimes, or how can an avatar lose others, or how can an avatar be in complete alignment. Is it okay with you if we do that?
Yes, sounds very good.
Very well. So we're going to take one avatar, one for other as well, meaning an avatar that would receive information that would trigger emotions that will be joy, sadness, fulfillment, anger, anxiety, you name them. There is so many of them, and there is so many level of each emotions that we would not be able to go in detail with it, but we believe every player is able to understand what emotions are and how leveled they can be.
Mhm.
So let's say an avatar processing their emotions and acknowledging them properly, meaning at the second, let's say, joy kicks in because they are being fed something that they are enjoying very much, and it gives them joy inside and it gives them fulfillment. And this avatar decided to portray these emotions outside on their physicality and express this joy by a smile, by excitement, by an energetical pattern that will be sent out that would match the frequency of the vibrational information received. This player will be then completely aligned with what they are feeling inside and what they are sending back out. So what they would perceive at the moment of themselves would be matching what others might perceive at the moment of themselves as well. Do you follow?
Could you repeat that last bit again, please?
Yes. What the avatar will perceive of themselves at the moment they are in touch with these emotions of joy, if they are able to convey on the physicality the same vibrational pattern, then what others will be perceiving of this avatar will be the same.
Right.
So we will therefore have one avatar, right? Now, if this avatar that is receiving inside joy, fulfillment, excitement, but decided to control that energy in motion and to somehow interfere in how it's going to code on their physicality, meaning they're going to feel like a bubble of joy inside, bubble of excitement, but they are deciding to not act on it and to diminish this level of joy and excitement. So on the physical aspect of themselves, it doesn't show as intensely and it doesn't match what they are really feeling. Doing this, they are voluntarily creating a different avatar for others to see and witness, meaning the one they are at the moment and the one they know they are at the moment is not the same person the others will meet at the same moment. Does that make sense?
Does.
Okay. Hmm.
Is there anything we can do to make it easier for body?
It will be okay.
Okay.
So when this happens, it could create different stories for everybody involved. The first story that could create is a misalignment for the player because since they are existing in their own eyes as the emotional being they know they are, but they are now existing on others' player eye as a completely different being, they will feel a disconnection or they will feel misunderstood or they will feel like they are not being seen for who they truly are, which could lead to a disconnection with others and a misalignment within the self. Or it could also give them the ability to hide and deceive if this is what they need to be doing, and therefore use an avatar within an avatar in order to experience the game in a way they feel more in control of compared to playing it with their own emotions that are somehow unpredictable because they are raw. Does that make sense to you?
Mhm.
Okay. So this already creates several possibility of existence and experience, not only for the players, but for also the other players around. So this is why the emotional layer and the way it's related to the physical layer is very difficult to cover and is also very plural in the way it could impact many players' experience and create many different realities. And there is no one correct way to conduct or to steer the relation within the emotional bodies and the physical bodies because every way of playing is accepted and is able to exist. But it's important to understand that it will create a reality that is completely different in function if you decided to match your emotional layer with your physical layer, or if you decide to somehow disconnect them and create several versions of yourself.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Or rather, could you give a specific example for
Yes.
that? How
Yes.
different realities are created?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. We could take something very easy. A hug. Everybody knows what a hug is, right?
Right.
So, two players hugging each other. Let's say player A is the one that will be looking at on an emotional layers level. So, player A and B are hugging. Player A emotionally feels very warm, very loved, very filled with a higher vibration at the moment of this hug. The information translated within its emotional layers as something very high vibrationally, something that is completely beautiful and warm. Okay. But because the other layer of this player, which could be attributed to the mental layer, would decide that if they connect their emotions to their physical layer, it will make them vulnerable. It will make them too emotional. It will make them in a way that will not allow them to have the hand on the other, meaning, let's say this hug was given between colleague, right? And player A will be the boss. And they don't want to be seen as vulnerable. They don't want to be seen as an emotional player because they could see that further in it might be complicated for them to keep being the boss and applying some firm rules and this type of stuff. So they consciously decided to disconnect that emotional layer from the physical layer. And instead of exalting these emotions through their physicality, when the hug is done, they would appear very cold, very distant, very professional, right? And this will then be perceived by player B as, oh, the warm hug that I give player A is not received as I intended to give. My love hasn't been felt. The warmness of this hug hasn't reached through the emotional layer of player A, and therefore I am perceiving player A as a cold being, as a non-vulnerable being, as someone that is unable to receive emotions, as someone that is not in touch with his or her emotions. I am now giving myself the information that the person I have in front of me is portrayed as a cold, non-vulnerable, non-receptive, non-emotional being, which is completely the opposite of what the real being player A is. So now player A, who exists as player A in their own mind, exists now as player A, B, in player B mind. Do you see what we're trying to say?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So now everything that player A will be doing in life and will be carrying or choosing to put into action, it will be received and translated in player B eyes with the idea that player A is non-vulnerable, not emotional, and not warm at all. So it will be already taken with an alteration compared to what player A really is. So player A will now have to experience their own reality as the player A they know they are, as the player A they feel they are, but they will also have to deal with the reality they created for player B to see them as. Are we being clear, or is it still a little confusing?
No, I think you're being clear.
Okay. So you now have two different player A existing. One inside player A that is perfectly in touch with its emotion because it is able to feel and know what their emotions layer is made of. And another player A that is the one perceived by others that is not at all involving correct emotional layers of player A. So this is why when we were saying at the beginning, emotional layer is the secret layer of a player. It can be decided to be shown and shared, or it can be secretly guarded. But if there is a disconnection between the emotional layers and the physical layer of a player, automatically it creates a different version of the same player for others to see. And therefore, it would create interactions and exchange of informations that will be based on this new avatar that has been created and not on the real avatar that is embodied by the player. Does that make sense?
Yes, the image I receive is that it makes the game a bit more complicated.
A lot more complicated, a very much lot more complicated for every party involved, because what is being sent away by player A will somehow put player A at discomfort because the emotional layer of player A will make them feel a certain way. But because what is perceived of them will not match that, it would put them in some kind of isolation, of being misunderstood, of being misperceived, of being portrayed wrongly, or of them not being able to express their true self. And it could lead to misalignment, or it could be exactly what they wanted to do because it will give them a certain advantage of not revealing who they truly are.
Mm.
Will be able to manipulate probably a little more their other fellow players, and it would give them exactly what they needed. But it would somehow build new aspect of players within the same game, within the same avatar vehicle, which would create somehow newer version of realities that at one point, if that players would want to be matching exactly who they are inside and how the world is perceiving them would require them to break the avatar they constructed in order to be able to express and manifest their true self and what they want starting further. Does it make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
does.
So we would like to explain that because this is how the emotional bodies of a player could create a multitude of players that would share the same vehicle, but that will exist consciously or unconsciously or voluntarily or not from that player within the eyes of others. And this is really important because remember, this playtime is played with each other. So you can not only exist for yourself, you also have to exist for other players to witness you and to share your experience. And if you're creating different avatars within the same vehicle, this could complicate your game, or this could steer your game in a way that you have to be aware of. So you are not surprised that you are not able to connect, interact, or create reality with others the way you want to. This is very important knowledge to have. You are in charge of creating that connection within your own layers. You are in the position of choosing if you are guarding your emotional layer for yourself or if you are connecting it to your physicality. They are all okay, but knowing that you are guarding your emotional layers, you need to be aware of the fact that it's gonna create different version of yourself for others to witness. You cannot play the game guarding your emotional self, disconnecting it from your physicality, and hoping to be perceived, understood for the emotional being that you truly are. Because this is not possible. And this is not fair to ask of other players. Have you chosen to hide your emotional self? And this is sometimes the key and the trigger to many, many, many issues within interactions with each other because the player would like to be seen and understood, but at the same time refuses to connect their emotional layers with their physical one. Does that make sense to you?
A lot. I can already sense how being aware of this is quite profound.
Yes, it is. And it's a gymnastic. It's
Mm.
constant training because when the soul come in this vehicle, being that emotional being, experiencing those emotions is so intense and is so fragile and it's so raw that if you are in an experiment that you would like to somewhat control and that you will be able to choose for yourself consciously and mentally within your mental layer how you're going to steer your own game and how you're going to portray yourself. It is extremely hard to accept, fully connect your emotional layers with the physical layers within your vehicle. But if you would like somehow to be completely aligned within yourself, this is where you need to choose. You need to be either choosing to guard your emotions, somehow create a disconnection within your physical and your emotional self, accepting that therefore others will never perceive you the way you are. If you can accept that and be okay, and if you decide to create this experiment with this frame of reference, you could be in perfect alignment with it and you could be perfectly fine in your own game. But if you are unable to accept that it will somehow isolate you, it will somehow annihilate you because you will never be perceived for who you truly are. If you're not able to accept that consequence, then you need to be making all the efforts possible to link correctly your emotional layers within your physical layers in order for it to reflect what you are feeling inside and portray it outside for others to see. Does that make sense to you?
Does.
We would like to emphasize that this is the first assessment, the first choice that players acknowledging those different layers within themselves need to be making for him or herself, depending on what they choose to be for their experiment, because it will have the most heavy impact on the life they're going to manifest, because they are not building a life alone. They are building it with other players at all times. So therefore, when one is conscious of that, this is the first decision that needs to be made. Am I fully linking my emotional layers with my physical layers in order to portray myself exactly as I am, and therefore experiment with only one avatar? That would be having various moments, but that will always be one avatar. Or am I unable to fully connect those layers within myself? And I need in this case to be okay with the fact that I'm going to automatically create multiple avatar that would have the same vehicle. And therefore I need to be okay and in acceptance that others may not perceive me exactly for who I am. And I need to give them the okay of being wrong somehow in the interpretation of what I'm giving, because it would not come out of myself the way I am feeling it inside. Does that make sense?
A lot. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for emphasizing this. What came to mind was the concept of being an introvert. You might be aware of this term. We use it for people who don't seem to be very expressive with what's going on inside of them. What would you like to say about this?
Well, we could use this as the perfect example as a player that is unable to connect layers between them. And sometimes this is also part of the design. Remember, everyone come and choose to experience a game that is gonna give them different experiments. So let's say an introvert may have chosen to come and experience alone their true self and confront themselves to others not being able to be perceived for who they are. This could be one of their own design for their own experiments, or it could be a player that is somehow having a hard time connecting the different layers within their own vehicle because the vehicle is so complex somehow. And sometimes when the soul is entering the game, not completely measuring the complexity of the human design, it could be harder than anticipated to manage to link all the different aspects of themselves within each other in order to form a whole. And this might take years, it might take lifetimes, it might take trainings, it might take every bit of energy they have within themselves to be able to link those layers together. They might succeed at it, they might not. In the case of an introvert, this is the biggest example of a conscious or unconscious disconnection within 2 or 3 layers, we may say. The first one would be the emotions will not match the physical, but it will probably also not match the mental, because the mental will probably be driven by fear or by, let's say, fear of non-acceptance, fear of rejection, fear of how their own self is going to be handled and received by the other. So you have the mental layers that will be pretty much entangled with the emotional, because whatever will be felt inside that player will then be processed within the mental, that will decide to be fearful of what could happen as a consequence if they were linking that emotions to their physicality. The mental body will take over and decide to anticipate other players' reception of the given information, creates a pattern of fear and panic or any type of lower emotions that would then be heavy to carry, and that would then force the player to hide and go into protection mode, thinking they have to disconnect the physical aspect from the emotional one in order to avoid what their mental layer decided to anticipate as a reaction from others. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes.
Sometimes the player is right in their perception and anticipation on how the others might react, but sometimes they are inaccurate, meaning they are anticipating a reaction that would never happen, and therefore they will prevent themselves from sharing their true nature that would be perfectly well received, just because they decided to choose for that other player how they would receive the information. This is a highly egoic anticipation. Humans' ego is very protective and very strong when it comes to unknown and potential danger for the player. Therefore, the mental structure of the body decide to anticipate and to choose what reaction will come out of another player without necessarily knowing all the set of information that this other player have, creating a false anticipation in the action or reaction the other is gonna decide to put out. But this alone is another type of issues, because the mental layers is involved based on the first emotional trigger. The mental layer will now bounce back to the emotional. You see, instead of going to the physical, it will bounce back to the emotional, triggering another set of emotions. And that new set of emotions might be linked to the physical. Do you understand what we're trying to say?
I believe so.
Okay, we're going to try to put it in a more concrete example. Let's say player A is in love with player B, right? Feeling immense love, unconditional love, emotions throughout the entire cellular body. But this emotion is bounced back into the mental layer. The mental layer is anticipating, oh, maybe player B is not going to appreciate us. It's not going to appreciate that emotion. Maybe they're going to see us as lame. They're not going to share that feeling. Then the mental is creating another emotion into player A, which would be fear of rejection, fear of sharing this beautiful aspect of self. And now player A will choose to connect this new emotion through the physicality by bypassing the first love emotion and deciding that they need to be careful and they need to anticipate the rejection and therefore not share on their physical layer the love frequency they are feeling deep down.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Would it be correct to say that a traumatic experience can also result in a sudden disconnect between the layers?
Absolutely. Because a traumatic will create not only a mark, if we may say, on an emotional level, but it will also create a mark on the mental ego protection mode of the body because it will be associated and mentally processed and carried as a set of information that will automatically trigger that reaction, that experience as a trauma. And therefore, the avatar would want to be in full protection mode in order to not feel that trauma again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How would someone who becomes aware of this and who wants to establish a stronger connection between their emotional and the physical layer, let's say an introvert who decides, I want to become more aligned when it comes to my layers, how would such a person go about it?
The first step we could see would be to recognize and accept that they are lacking skill on connecting the layers. Meaning, if player A is an introvert, the first step will be to recognize and accept they are an introvert and to understand that means they are unable yet to fully connect their true emotions with their physicality, and therefore they are not portraying themselves exactly as they are feeling inside. If they can recognize that this is their mechanism, and instead of rejecting it completely, accepting that at this given moment, this is all they are able to do, that they are not quite there yet where they are able to properly link their layers with each other, this is the first step to actually doing it. Because when you recognize it and you know what you're able and unable to do without judging it harshly and with accepting that this is simply where you're at on this aspect of your game, then it will give you more strength and higher vibration to carry with you in order to dwell on something that you're unable to do, on a failure, on something that is not correctly done. Do you see what we're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay, so the first step will be this. And then it will be baby step. Once they recognize and accept, the training for them will be to try to recognize when their mental layer is entering protective mode. Let's say simple emotions. Today, I'm going to eat at my friend's and they are serving me a food that makes me very uncomfortable, makes me very disgusted, that is not giving me a good emotions eating, that is actually stirring some disgust in me. If I wanted to make the effort to link this emotion with my physicality, I should somehow being able to verbalize that unfortunately, even if I appreciate the dinner, I am not able to enjoy because it has a particular taste for me. Once the need of giving this information to my physicality is met by my mental layer, I will probably encounter something that will be of fear of not being politically correct, fear of appearing ungrateful, fear of not being kind or nice to the person feeding me. And automatically it will bounce back into my emotional self, and I will choose to say that it was delicious, for example. Baby step. When I recognize that I'm going into this mode where I'm mentally telling myself, do not say that, do not bring it into your physicality, do not express that emotion of disgust because it is not politically correct and you're anticipating the other reaction. Being able to recognize that this mechanism is at place and finding 3 seconds of bravery to bypass this and embrace the honesty of it and decided to just say that you appreciate the meal, but unfortunately you were unable to appreciate taste-wise. This is a good way of training yourself in speaking your emotions. We took a random example that was maybe not the best, but at least you could understand the mechanism at stake. This is how one would need to train in order to come out of their shell, if we may say. When they recognize their mechanism going into safety mode, decide to bypass it by forcing themselves somehow to be a little more brave and to not decide for the other player how they will react to what they have to say. Because this is the major issue. A player needs to understand that they have no right to decide how the other is going to react. If they do that, they are taking freedom of choice from this other player because they are already deciding what reactions or what actions this player is going to make. But it's not for them to decide. All they could do is assess their set of information, decide for themselves how they're going to put it out, and wait to see how the others decide to assess this information and put it out in return. So an introvert would need to train into maybe courage of not caring how the other is going to react to their own emotion. And this is hard training. This is not easy. This is something that might take time, but this is all based on courage and bravery and respecting the other freedom of choice and freedom of actions and reactions. And all this could be done by recognizing the mechanism of self-protection and anticipation of others and tearing it down little by little. But each and every time they are trying to consciously do this, if they are not succeeding right away, instead of mourning or grieving their failure, they need to accept it. They need to tell themselves a different story. Instead of telling themselves, once again, I failed, they need to tell themselves, I tried. This time, I did not get it right, but I tried. And next time, I'll do better. This is a completely different scenario that they will feed themselves. And this is what will allow them one day to have a success. And once this success is there, they would feed themselves with gratitude and love and recognize that they did succeed this time and that the next time they can push that success a little stronger, a little higher, and so on and so on and so on, and build themselves out of this introvert area. Does that make sense?
Lot.
So once you want to change that aspect of yourself, it's a conscious training that needs to be taking place, and it needs to be taking place with gratitude and love for yourself and with respect and freedom of choice for others. This is the main energies that will be at stake, if we may say, in order to succeed in that training.
Excellent. Thank you so much for explaining this. I believe it has the potential to create a whole new level of awareness for a lot of people.
We hope so. We are well aware that the human design is so complicated that it could be very difficult to fathom and understand how to approach each layers and how to make them bind smoothly with each other. And there is no way of delivering knowledge and tools in an easy way. So we are doing our best approaching it in order for you to know where to start and how you could reinforce that link between your own layers. But we are also trying to convey the message of being kind with yourself because the task that is being asked is very difficult, is very intricate. There are many, many layers that are into place, and it is normal that this game is difficult somehow. And it is normal that no one's have it right the first time. So this is why being kind to yourself when trying to better yourself is important.
I assume that the disconnect between the layers or the potential for a disconnect between the layers is part of the design of this game.
Yes, it is. Of course, it is because it forces you to decide for yourself how you want to leave this aspect of you and what you want to do with it. And once you decide it, like we said before, do you want to link it? Do you want to guard it? It creates an entire new game available to you, a game that may change at any given point if you choose to. It makes it even more interesting because it shows you that the complexity of having multiple layers of existence somehow is not as simple and can be very challenging. And it gives you more creative way to design your own self through this game, if that makes sense.
A question I would like to ask. You mentioned earlier that by not connecting your emotional layer with your physical layer, you are creating or you are contributing to the creation of another reality, so to speak, another
Yeah.
version of you that is perceived by others, correct? Would it be correct to state that a person, let's say an introvert, who is assuming how the other person will react to their emotions, is doing the same thing regarding the other person?
Absolutely. See how complex that is?
Mhm.
Yes. Because when you're assuming the other person's reaction, first of all, what you're perceiving of this person could already be a different version of what they truly are.
Mhm.
So you're already creating, or not, but perhaps you're already creating a version because this is how they portray themselves. But now by anticipating, you're making this version choose and take actions or react in a way that is your own creation,
Mhm.
not there. Therefore, you're automatically creating a new version of that person that is existing only in your anticipation, which is your mental layers. But because you're able to link your mental and your emotional, you're now creating this newer version of that person into your emotional as well. And if you're connecting your emotional to your physical, you are now reacting to this newer version that only exists within yourself on the physical aspect,
Right.
which will create probably misunderstanding or surprises from the actual person because that person would not have seen that you reinvented them within your own layers and that your reactions giving now is not based on who they are, but on the version that you created of themselves just a minute ago. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I just remembered that there is a science out there that deals with, I think they call it microexpressions. And it states that it's very difficult for human beings to actually suppress the way they really feel about things, and that there are subconscious expressions on the physical layer that trained personnel is able to read. Can you speak about the purpose of this subconscious expression?
Yes, your subconscious is your true way of being. Remember, the layer that will allow the disconnection is your mental layers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your subconscious bypass that layer of yourself. So it could definitely link your emotional state of being with your physicality, bypassing what the mental layer is deciding to be. But you would not be conscious of what is transpiring within your physicality. It will be somehow a conversation between your subconscious self and your physical body. So it's not something that you'll be able to control. Therefore, when we are talking about linking voluntarily, consciously, the emotional with the physicality, we are excluding the link that already exists unconsciously between the two layers. This is different. And sometimes you also have players that are unable to fake it at all because their link subconsciously to their physicality is so strong that they will think they are not showing it, but it would show completely that even a non-trained person will be able to recognize that something is showing. For the ones that are able somehow to maintain a stronger conscious link or not within the two layers. Only a trained person that would, like you said, recognize micro expression or body languages will be able to understand who is the real person, who is the mental expression, the controlled expression, the controlled version of that person. Basically, they will be able to differentiate what the person is really feeling and what the person is pretending to feel. But it would take training to recognize when it's settled. Not everybody is able to do that. Or it would take training in the subtle ability, let's say, if one is able to perceive energy, or if you take a blind person, for instance, that has lost one physical sense and that has been forced to train on other perception, they might not need to see the physical body language or what is transpiring of the other to understand energetically how the other is feeling. So there are ways of perceiving the player for who they truly are, but not everybody is able to recognize that. And when we are able to recognize that, we are not able to use our own energy to tackle into the other being energy at all times. Some days are easier than others. But it is possible, yes. It is highly possible. This is not to be excluded. And this could also be trained for people reading energies more than listening to what the person says or how the person is trying to portray themselves. It takes training. It does.
It's very interesting that you just mentioned that because that would have been my next question. People we would consider to be empaths, right, who are very good at picking up
Yeah.
others' emotions. This would add a whole new layer to the game, right? Make it even more interesting.
Because when you're an empath and you're able to see through what the person bearer is, you could go further and you could try to understand why the person that is clearly feeling a certain way that you're able to perceive is choosing at this precise moment to hide it and portray himself or herself, depending on the choosing, a different way. Because empaths are very good at picking up the essence of the person, but if they want to push their ability further, they could also try to ask themselves why this person expressed the need of hiding this aspect and showing this one in my presence in this situation. Because it would probably give them even more information on the battle that is going on inside that person right now.
Right. Is it possible to block an empath from reading your emotional layer?
If you're a master at it, probably yes.
Mhm.
We would say that some empaths are so good at what they're doing that it's extremely difficult to hide from them. But the same way is true for the opposite. Some hiders are so very good at what they're doing that it could become very difficult even for an amazing empath to discern who is the true essence and who is not. So it will depend on the skill of the player within the situation. It would be very interesting to have an immensely strong empath with an immensely strong hider and see which one of them is able to crack the other. That would be an interesting show to witness.
Maybe a game for the future of mankind,
That would be very interesting to watch.
for entertainment.
Yes, exactly.
There is an expression that came to mind earlier. I believe that in English it's said that someone wears their heart on their sleeve,
Correct.
correct? This would be someone who has a very strong connection between their emotional and physical layers.
Yeah, this will be someone that is completely able to link them without any need for protection or boundaries, or just somebody that is completely transparent from what they feel and what they bring out.
Right. You mentioned earlier that it would be beneficial for an introvert, let's say, to acknowledge where they are on their path.
Yes.
I know of introverts who are quite triggered by being in the company of those who are wearing their heart on their sleeve.
Of course.
Can you explain why that is?
Yes. It's mirroring everything they're unable to do. The human player is amazing on that because you would see yourself within each other and you would use each other as mirror somehow. If what you see in a mirror is showing you everything you're trying to accomplish, everything you're battling, everything you wish you could succeed at but are unable to do, there's two options of receiving that information. Either you're taking with admiration and you're amazed by the ability of that person to do what you are unable to do at the moment, or to the contrary, you're taking it the hard way and it's very hurtful and painful for you to witness that somebody is succeeding at something that you are unable to do and that is causing you somehow pain in your experience. Therefore, if you are one of the second group, it will be very difficult for you to handle being in the presence of somebody portraying everything you're unable to do yourself. And it would be the same for pretty much any situation. Let's say if you are trying to be accomplished in your career and stuff like that, and you're struggling and you're still not making it, and you are in front of somebody that is the complete opposite of that, you will be the same way, either accepting that person with admiration and love, or you will be feeling like shit and being annoyed and being almost envious of that person. The same is true if you're trying to conceive and your friend just popped babies left and right. You see, every time you're seeing in the other what you are failing to create for yourself, it could take you to two distinct places. One that is love and hope, because you recognize it can be done and it gives you hope for yourself. And another place that will be dark and heavy because you're unable to accept that others may be able to manifest it and not you.
What does it depend on which way a person goes?
We believe it will depend on what you're able to handle, on what you're able to accept within yourself, because others are just mirroring what's inside you. So let's say if you're an introvert and you're unable to come to terms with that in order to accept it, So you are constantly bashing yourself, whiplashing yourself and feeling bad about being an introvert, and you're not accepting that this is who you are at the moment. The mirror will be very difficult for you to handle when you meet someone that is wearing their heart on the sleeve. If you're an introvert and you know you're an introvert and you're doing your best not to be an introvert anymore, but you're somehow accepting that for now, this is where you're at, probably the one that you would see in front of you would send you joy, hope, and it will be a pleasure to be around because this is what you will aspire to be.
Mm-hmm.
It will really depend on where you at within your own self because the other is only a mirror of this.
Right.
It's really not important them where they at. What is important is that you see yourself within them. Either you see what you are, either you see what you are not. And depending on how you accept yourself and how you're able to love yourself for who you are at the moment, this will be unbearable or this will be aspiring.
Right. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I've asked all the questions.
Apologies.
No worries. I've asked all the questions that popped up while we were speaking. We still have a bit more time for today, so I'll see if something else pops up. But in the meantime, I would like to ask you, is there anything you would like to add to what we've talked about today?
Well, maybe not add, but emphasize because we feel like this is made to help others, correct?
Correct.
So we hope by now that everyone is understanding the complexity of having multiple layers. And we really would love for each and every one of you to be able to understand that the first choice to be made consciously in order for you to link properly your layers accordingly to what you are wanting to do is to decide whether you are showing your emotional layer through your physicality or if you'd rather hiding your physical layer and somehow dilute it before it shows in your physicality. This is the choice that really need to be made consciously, knowing all the consequences it will have on your interactions and the way you will be perceived. We do believe that this is something of importance and that every player should start with that question in mind when it comes to linking layers properly and align themselves on the different level of their existence. Am I willing to portray myself for exactly what I feel? Or do I consciously choose to guard myself and keep secrets on my own emotions and portray myself as a different person, whether it's slightly different or completely different, knowing that it will create interactions based on a person that is not exactly me. This is a very important decision that needs to be consciously made if one player is attempting to conjugate, linked, or align themselves within their multiple layers.
And to connect back to something you mentioned, I believe in the previous session we had, once that choice is made, you have to own it as well.
Yes, of course. Once that choice is made, you have to own it. You have to accept and understand the consequences. But because at any given time, you have the right to choose. This is not because today you're choosing this, that tomorrow you cannot choose differently. This is important. But it needs to be understood that once this choice is made, there is no hiding behind others. The responsibility is yours. If you're portraying yourself as a single entity and all your layers are harmoniously linked to your true self, you're therefore creating one persona to live this game. If you're choosing to hide certain aspects of your persona, you are now consciously creating multiple personas that will interact within the same vehicle but play different games, creating different aspects and therefore altering interactions you may have with other players. This needs to be acknowledged, understood, accepted, and you need to be ready to tackle and handle the consequences and own the responsibility once you made that choice. You cannot hide and say, the others don't get me. The others are not understanding who I am. I am not being heard. If you consciously chose to disconnect your emotional layers from your physicality. This is not acceptable to not own what you're creating. Does that make sense?
Does, yes.
This is what would and will create misalignment for yourself if you are not owning your choices, if you are not taking responsibility for them, and if you are not accepting that this is the reality you chose to create. If at any given point this reality is no longer pleasing you, then please, by all means, assess, adjust your choices, make new ones. You have that freedom of choice, that free will. You are able to completely change your game just by changing your choices. But it is your own responsibility once you're understanding all the intricacy between your own layers to decide for yourself how you want to link and intertwine them.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I would like to ask one more question here. I believe we agreed on, or you suggested that the greater self, the part of us that is not incarnated on this plane, is the player, and the incarnated self is the avatar, correct?
Yes.
So it would be correct to say that the player, the greater non-incarnated self, is actually the true self.
Yes.
And today, yeah?
No, go on.
And today you said that the emotional self, the emotional layer, is the true self of the avatar, correct?
Yes, this is where we were going. The player, non-incarnated, is the true self as an entirety.
Mhm.
The emotional layers in the avatar is the resonance of that true self.
Mm.
So it's going to be the core. If we are looking at the layers, it's going to be the core of the avatar. It's going to be where the true essence of the player is stored and is active and is experiencing that game. Avatar cannot fake an emotion truly. It can approach faking it, but it cannot truly fake it because that emotion is the resonance of the player. So player as an unincarnated true self coming into an avatar, the resonance of that true self, the core of this avatar that is the essence of the player will be lingering in the emotional body. Is it a little bit more clear?
Yes, it is. Which is why every avatar that is born already comes with a certain set of emotional conditioning, correct? And this is why very young children can already feel very differently about the same thing.
Exactly.
Okay. Am I correct in assuming that the emotional setup can change, though, over the course of a life, depending on, I assume, the mental layer? Beliefs that might change can result in someone feeling very differently about something when they're 50 compared to when they were 20 years old.
Yes, absolutely. Because you're evolving in a game and you're evolving with the surrounding, you're evolving with the game code and design with other avatars. You are then imprinted with everybody and everything you encountered and your experience in that game.
Mhm.
So your emotional core will also evolve as you go. This is one of the purpose of this game, to make the player evolve within the emotional aspect as well.
Mhm.
This is why you come and embody yourself in an avatar that will allow you to experiment emotions through physicality, because it will allow those emotions to mature, to build up, to multiply, to expand, to complexify, to basically live within yourself and to create new levels of emotion, new complexity of it that you will then carry with you as a player non-incarnated and give you an experience of growth and new understanding of the complexity of emotions when put into a specific set of experiencing. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes. So the emotional experience of the avatar is directly being fed to the player and changing the player as well.
Yes.
Right.
You're a player. You come and play this playtime. When you exit this playtime, you're now a changed player. This is why, as a player, you go through playtimes to evolve. If you were a player going through playtimes, getting back to your player self without evolving, what would be the purpose of even playing?
Right.
The goal is to constantly evolve as an energy being.
Mhm.
And those different playtime has been designed and made for you to be able to accomplish that. Therefore, whatever experiment you're going to have on Earth, whatever this playtime is going to offer you, when your game is over in this playtime, you will be a changed player.
And this leads me to my final question for today. Can you confirm that Earth, our playtime here, is one with a rather big spectrum of emotions?
Huge spectrum of emotions. Not big, immense spectrum of emotions. Because remember, emotions multiply as well. So, like we said before, you have your own emotions. Then you have the emotions that get created within other layers of yourself. Bring back into your emotional body, send back out into the physicality, received, transformed by others. You do the same with others' emotions. All of it is building exponentially, and it creates such an immense range of it and perception and integration of many, 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 many energy emotions that you could not even see the end of it. It's too big. We could not even start to quantize it, quantify it. It's not possible. It's huge. And this is one of the most beautiful aspects of this game, is how energy can be expressed and put into motion within each and every avatar and between them and between their own layers. It's infinite.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. This is also why it can become so messy.
Right. Yeah, I can relate to that. All the avatars can probably.
Probably.
All right. Thank you so much for today. I think we've covered some fascinating ground, very interesting information. And this is something to ponder, I believe, for everyone who is listening to this or reading this. Yes, a lot of appreciation for your support today. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having us. We love discussing with you.
Well, I can say the same thing. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it immensely. And would it be correct to say that today we interacted with the aspect of Rufus we call the mother.
Yes, you are correct. This is a subject, a topic that we are very fond of, and we love discussing it.
Wonderful. Then I suspect we'll talk to each other next time again.
Probably.
All right. Is there anything else you would like to say before we close today's session?
We think we are pleased with what has been shared today, and we are looking forward to our next conversation.
Me too. All right. Then I now ask all well-meaning higher dimensional energies and beings who have worked with us today with much love and deep gratitude to proceed to where they reside.